For over a decade, Parkway Drive have been one of the biggest bands in popular heavy metal, with their name being used to draw in huge crowds at festivals, their extravagant shows packing stadiums and fairgrounds, and their merch being sold in almost every form imaginable. Now, Parkway Drive have gone through some pretty significant changes in their more than 20 years as a band, but they first gained international attention in the mid-2000s by playing an increasingly typical style of metalcore that mixed heavy melodic guitars with brutal breakdowns and vocals. And despite playing a style of metalcore that had become pretty commonplace in the 2000s, the band stood out for their relentless touring schedule, catchy riffs, and the brutal gutturals of frontman Winston McCall. But by the 2010s and into the 2020s, Parkway Drive began packing stadiums and headlining festivals like Wacken Open Air, with a modified alternative metal sound that blended their original brutal metalcore with more melodic elements and arena rock choruses. Despite these changes, there are some features of the band that have remained recognizable throughout their career. First, the lineup has remained almost completely unchanged since its formation, with the exception of a few different bassists. But with the addition of Jaya Pi O'Connor in 2006, the lineup has been stable ever since. And second, the band's musical changes have always featured the signature catchy riffs of lead guitarist Jeff Ling. Also significant for the band's continuity, since their first full-length album, Killing with a Smile, debuted in the US in 2006. All of Parkway Drive's albums have been released through independent punk label Epitaph Records. And finally, one of the features that the band has been known for throughout their career is their humbleness and casual image as a group of 5 Aussie surfer friends who are, at the end of the day, just having a good time. So some of the questions that I want to tackle in this video are: how did Parkway Drive go from a group of hardcore surfer kids in an obscure Australian beach town to one of metal's most successful 21st century acts? But more importantly, how were they able to maintain their core identity in their march to the top? And this, I hope, will lead to a bigger discussion about how bands can become successful without compromising their core identity and by just being themselves, even if they experiment with different musical directions. Now, even though some of the members did start playing together in 2002, Parkway Drive were officially formed in 2003 in Byron Bay, Australia, a small town between Brisbane and Sydney known mostly for coastal tourism and surfing. But at the turn of the millennium, punk rock and hardcore became popular in the skateboarding and surfing subcultures, with surf videos like Taylor Steele's 90s surf hits Momentum and The Show, pairing the extreme sport with bands like H2O, Good Riddance, Pennywise, and Strung Out, just to name a few. These surf videos also helped bring these bands to new audiences around the world, and the association between extreme sports and punk and hardcore made its way to the surfer town of Byron Bay, with drummer Ben Gordon saying that it's a pretty stereotypical thing to say for this band, but that's how we were driven to this music, to punk music. While some of the other members have cited punk bands like Bad Religion as their biggest inspiration. And this was the setting when Parkway Drive played its first show at the Byron Youth Activity Center, or the Youthy, in 2003, an environment that fostered a tight-knit community of hardcore and punk fans and close friendships, which also factored into the band's lineup and its long-time stability. Another major early epicenter for this community was Parkway Drive drummer Ben Gordon's parents' house, known as the Parkway House, where friends would hang out, bands would jam, and even play exclusive shows, including bands like I Killed the Prom Queen and Comeback Kid. The band members also had an eye for adventure, no doubt inspired by Aussie surfer culture, and something that has given the band a major point of identity, both in terms of their image and their constant touring. According to Winston McCall, the reason we started touring was because it was an opportunity to go somewhere you've never been before. It was just the idea of, hey, this is a vehicle to travel and have an experience. If we say no to these opportunities, you might never get them ever again, because who the hell ever gets out of this town? And Ben Gordon corroborated this by revealing that we weren't so much determined to make it. We just really liked touring. We liked driving around with our friends and seeing the world. We just wanted to keep doing it. This knack for adventure also factored into the band's wild antics, with Jaya O'Connor and his friends, self-dubbed the Rotten Crew, doing jackass-like stunts that the band as a whole became known for. But much of their wild and reckless attitude has paid off, from the band's adventurous tour videos to their live performances. So the band's lineup and identity were set early on. Parkway Drive were an adventurous group of hardcore kids that came together with a DIY spirit that has mostly stayed with them throughout their entire career. And the band's continuity in their lineup and image coincided with continuities in their early music as well. Killswitch Engage guitarist Adam D produced both Killing with a Smile and Horizons, which included one of the band's most standout tracks. Even their next two albums, Deep Blue and Atlas, while experimenting with different styles of metal and hardcore, still sounded familiar, but with the addition of more accessible sing-along riffs like Wild Eyes, a progression and melody that fans still often chant at their live shows. But it was 2015's Ire that marked the first, most notable musical shift for the band, as they began experimenting more with alternative metal and rock choruses, something that reflected the band's new goal of writing songs specifically catered to live shows. This era arguably saw the greatest transformation the band had ever experienced, not only in sound, but in terms of success as well. Leading with hit singles like Crushed and Vice Grip, the band received widespread attention and the album performed extremely well, as Ire would go on to reach number 23 on the UK charts, number 1 on Australia's ARIA charts, and number 1 on the US Billboard Hard Rock Albums chart, selling almost 15,000 copies in its first week in the US. But despite the success of the band's new direction, it had its detractors as well. During the release of the band's follow-up album, Reverence, which was an even sharper detour from their previous metalcore sound, Jeff Lynne would reveal that when we put out Vice Grip from Ire, we knew we were in for a beating. When we first saw what people were saying, we thought we were getting killed. A lot of us took it to heart. I had never been ridiculed like that before. As Parkway Drive rose to new heights, by incorporating new, often more accessible musical elements, they also divided some of their fans. But at the same time, many of the familiar features in the band's look and sound were still there, including Ling's catchy riffs, Winston's gutturals, and the image of a bunch of wild Aussies having the time of their lives. The band also stayed with their now old-time label Epitaph Records, and back in 2010, Winston said that we signed to them because we knew it was a big label, but also small enough where you felt comfortable to express yourself, and I always knew that environment would help us grow. So it appears that this was a genuine statement as the band was exploring new directions with Ire and later Reverence. So how were they able to maintain their identity amidst their newfound success and new musical directions, including their seeming to be genuine about their goal of playing the music they love and having a good time? One potential explanation, and one that might kind of seem silly at first, is that the band's apparent humbleness, DIY ethic, and sense of adventure are because they all surf.
Surfing's the source. It'll change your life. Swear to God.
Now that explanation might seem kind of dubious at first, but there are studies that have shown a direct connection between surfing and being more down to earth. For example, one study by students at the University of Iowa found that surfing could decrease anxiety and depression. And surfing, or in the case of Winston McCall, bodyboarding, is a major part not only of the band's image, but also of each of the band members' lives. Jeff Lynne even said, "We're all crazy surfers. If you put us on the spot and said, choose music or surfing, sorry fans, it's over. The music is done. Out the window. We're all surfers that happen to play music. Lucky for us, that ultimatum hasn't been dealt, so let the good times roll." The band's DVDs and even music videos have also provided a wealth of evidence of the band's dedication to surfing. However, it can't be as simple as all that. Surf culture also has its fair share of aggression, violence, and egotism, and not all surfers are chill, down-to-earth metal hippies. So that might not be the whole explanation, but there is something to that mix of punk and hardcore aggression with the beach bum lifestyle that helps explain the band members' overall demeanor. But another point about the band is that they've always seemed to convey a genuine love for what they do, along with maintaining a sense of humor. In addition to the jackass-like stunts some of the band members used to pull off earlier in their career, and even with all the darkness associated with some of their lyrics and album artwork, and of course the fire and smoke of their live shows, there's something ultimately goofy and easygoing about the band that has factored into their general likability. The image of carefree kids stuck in grown-up bodies has long been a factor of Parkway Drive's live shows, including the band using props on stage like everything from bodyboards to inflatable rafts. Winston McCall has also been known to crowd surf with what appears to be very little consideration of his own personal safety, while Luke, Jeff, and Jaya have all had to play on stage with casts in wheelchairs. First in 2011 when Luke fractured his ankle surfing, and then in 2015 when Jeff tore his hamstring, also surfing, and then again in 2019 when Jaya ruptured his ACL and had to play the band's largest show to date, headlining at Wacken Open Air, in a wheelchair. And when asked about his experience producing Parkway Drive's first two full-length albums, Adam D said that, "They are outstanding dudes playing music for all of the right reasons. I am stoked I could be a part of it." And this reputation of the band members being easy to get along with would be a major point of cohesion for the band, as they would come face to face with their greatest challenge since forming in 2003. In the spring of 2022, fresh off the COVID-19 lockdowns, Parkway Drive made a surprise announcement that they would be canceling their upcoming US tour and taking a multi-month hiatus. The reason was, for many, even more surprising, as the band announced in a message to fans that they were taking time off from touring and playing together to attend group therapy and address underlying issues between the members that had been impacting them after almost 20 years of playing together. In their message, they said that the relentless nature of being in this band has given us very little time to reflect on who we are as individuals, who we want to be, and the toll it is taking on ourselves and our friendships. It has always been 100% commitment or nothing, and they asked fans for their understanding and respect as the members would use the time off to face their demons. The band would follow this up by releasing a short documentary about their therapy together, where the members opened up about their issues, from the position of Jaya O'Connor as a full-time member of the band, the conflicting interests and creative differences between main songwriters Winston and Jeff, and what McCall would label as all of the band members' different toxic habits. In fact, some of the admissions made by the band members seemed to negate all the positive things that had previously been attached to their image, including their wild and carefree attitude, and the most recognizable feature of the band, the genuine fun they seemed to be having throughout their career, with Ben admitting that the culture we grew up in Byron and in Australia at large really, was the culture of writing off or teasing your mates. It would be like a war zone, like you had to be on guard. Somebody would be attacking you and you'd have to be ready to respond. And Winston added that, "I think the concept of toxic masculinity 100% relates to us. I think it relates to the era that we were brought up in. I think it relates to the way that we chose to treat each other." This hiatus brought several of these issues to light that could have easily tarnished the band's reputation. And in hindsight, the band's therapy session shed light on some of the previous problems that were evident before. For example, the 2020 documentary Viva the Underdogs begins with the band members squabbling and talking over each other, stressing about the money and logistics it would take to make big, extravagant shows in arenas and at festivals. So it might have seemed as if the band had become the inevitable, a group of pouty, over-pampered rock stars whining about things other bands could only dream of. But their openness about their problems and willingness to confront them at the expense of a lucrative tour had the opposite effect, seeming to confirm their dedication to their craft as well as their authenticity and genuine love for what they do. According to Luke, it was pretty evident that everyone wanted to feel like they were in a band again, like in a band of mates. And it wasn't about trying to get the biggest slice of the pie, which is evidenced by the band inviting Jaya to the therapy sessions and eventually paying him as a full-time member, which was a financial sacrifice for the rest of the band members. And while the band, seeming to have buried the hatchet to return to their fun selves, could have theoretically just been a PR stunt, there is another aspect of their story that can't be overlooked: their almost pathological dedication to their project. The fact that Drive is in the band's name is fitting, as they've had an almost constant drive to take control of their destiny, maintain what they've created, and push all the boundaries. Their DIY ethic can be seen in the band members taking full responsibility for most of their own career, from video development and design to production. In 2013, Luke revealed that Parkway has always been a DIY band. We make all our own decisions and book everything ourselves. We still book every flight, do all our tour logistics, coordinate production, order all the merch, get designs, manage our online store, do all the bookkeeping, and control our budgets ourselves. Everything that goes on in this band goes through me and the other guys. No one has their fingers in our pie or is taking advantage of us. So the band taking full control of their destiny seems to have been a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it has allowed them to be genuine and to have fun, including planning worldwide tours, while also giving themselves time to do things like explore new surf spots or even take a road trip through South America with busted mopeds. But on the other hand, the responsibility has taken its toll on the band and their relationships with each other. But despite the hardships, in 2023, Parkway Drive announced a 20th anniversary tour that would span over 2 years from North America to Europe and the UK. And they claimed it would be their most ambitious tour ever, with more fire, more energy, and a production that's bigger than anything we've done before. Something that would seem fitting for the band that has always continued to try and push the limits, and have fun while doing it. So going back to the original question, how was Parkway Drive able to hold on to their core identity after years of stylistic changes, growing success, and internal struggles? Well, in my opinion, it's a combination of all of these factors. The down-to-earth lifestyle associated with surfing, the humble origins of a small scene and town, the sense of humor, and the DIY ethic. But I'll leave the conclusion up to you. What do you think about the relationship between authenticity and success? Can a band as big as Parkway Drive continue to hold on to the values that they've claimed to be championing since their humble beginnings? Or are heavy bands who are driven to become as big as possible and experiment with new styles destined to lose their core identities? Let me know what you think think in the comments, and I'll see you next time here on Heavy Academia.